But the monumental part of it was hearing Steve Lukather. Hold the Line was getting ready to play, but then this other song, Breakdown Dead Ahead, and I was like, who the heck is this? I mean, that's completely, I don't know the solo, but I hadn't heard this kind of energy coming from the electric guitar quite like that.
Today's episode is sponsored by Gator Cases. Guitarists, like any other musician, value the advantages of proper protection for their gear. Guitars, amps, effects, and accessories all need safe transport and storage. Luckily, Gator's got you covered. All right, Andy, thanks for being here.
Oh man, great to be with you, Zach.
Okay, you have said in a couple interviews that one of the most monumental songs for you is Breakdown Dead Ahead Boss Skaggs. What do you love about that song?
It wasn't necessarily, well, the song is great, but the monumental part of it was hearing Steve Lukather. It was a moment in time, at least in how I think of it chronologically, it was right about the time I started hearing Luke with Toto. So I don't know if it's 77 or 78, but somewhere in that time frame, Hold the Line was getting ready to play, but then this other song, Breakdown Dead Ahead, and I was like, who the heck is this? You know, and it was some kind of... I mean, that's completely, I don't know the solo, but that's I hadn't heard this kind of energy coming from the electric guitar quite like that. So again, no offense to Boss Skaggs and no offense to Breakdown Dead Ahead, but it wasn't necessarily the song, it was the guitar player on it. But it's a cool pop FM radio rock tune.
Aren't those slides, I feel like that's so Lukather and then later Dan Huff, like that is so him, right?
Yeah, it is. Well, for me initially, yes, but then if you go back and hear Larry Carlton, I mean, there's a lot of things that Larry was doing before, Dan and Luke, but it's the way they put it together. It's like anything else when you look at the Stevie Ray Vaughan and what he got from Hendrix and Albert King, you can trace the lineage, but then they make it their own and put it out there in a certain way that just really hadn't been done with the type of conviction and tone. And that's what it was for Luke for me, because I hadn't heard Carlton yet. A couple years later would hear Room 335, that record, his solo record. And that was another epiphany. There was a lot of epiphanies at this time, because it's in 78. I guess I'm like 15, 16 years old, really playing well, good straight ahead rock and roll. But I was coming from the 70s arena rock. It was all Kiss and Nugent, Rush, Foghat, REO Speedwagon. Great foundation. But then I hear guys that are kind of bringing more to the table. And that was, with Lukather, with the some of the band. Some wider bends and but it was his time feel and where he put things. And then there's later some chromaticisms that start happening. So it was kind of, searching for new pathways to take me further, because I was starting to listen to jazz. My first guitar teacher at the age of 16 was turning me on to all the great classic jazz players. He was a big Barney Kessel fan. So I was getting some of that information. So I started hearing some of the rock guys drawing from some of that, and I realized eventually that it could all be put together. And then when I heard Mike Stern a couple years later, it's like, well, there it is. That's the next level, But yeah, the Breakdown Dead Ahead thing was certainly because of my hero and buddy Luke.
Hey, real quick, if you want some of the licks that Andy Timmons is playing in this interview, check out my Patreon. Everything's tabbed out, ready to go, linked in the pinned comment. All right, on with the interview. But when you heard that solo that you point out, like, did you learn it note by note, and then did that make you explore other records that Lukather was on? Because I've heard you mention the song on a couple interviews.
Well, yeah. So no, it literally became, especially like by the time I got down to Miami, which would have been 83. I'd already, it was a game of just finding anything with Lukather's name in the credits and buying that record. It's literal as that. Now, I didn't learn a lot of solos note for note. I might have gotten a lick, but with a lot of things, I mean, there was a bit of that, but I was kind of lazy. But I would take the energy in some of the ideas and just kind of start integrating it into my own whatever I was doing. Very fortunately, I mean, from the age of 13, I'd been in a band, and still to this day, I guess I could say I've never not been in a band. I was always gigging. So whatever information I was getting influenced by, I was in a band playing 3 nights a week or 4 nights a week live, so I'd be implementing these things. But I wasn't like a great, transcriber practicer. I did a lot. I learned a lot of Kiss, solos note for note, or some of the early rock stuff I would have been getting into. Um, yeah. So I mean, it wasn't particular licks, but just the energy and the ideas behind it. I think that, and that's a healthy thing. You can go both paths and get just as much. And I do later on, I got much better at transcribing and really learning things a bit more note for note when I found it, was necessary, might be beneficial.
I don't understand though, because when I look at players like you and I go, how do I get to a level like Andy Timmons? What comes to
Oh
my
yeah.
mind is that I need to transcribe more. But that's not really what you spend most of your time doing.
I spent my time playing. And so I know it's a weird thing to say because you have to learn in order to be able to play. And I mean, obviously transcribing is hugely valuable. It's just, it's down to the discipline of the player, I think, and the personality and the makeup of how they function and how they process information. My son, who started playing when he was 16, he's 21 now, is a really killer, like heavy. He's on a death metal band. And I tried at certain points to get him to like, here's some pentatonic scale. He just had no interest in any of it. And I went, oh man, this is going to be really useful for him later. But I hear stuff coming out of his room that I have no idea how he's doing it. And I'll go in and ask him. He'll go, well, I don't know. But so there's certain things about transcribing in theory that can be very, very beneficial, but it can also be detrimental as far as inhibiting you. Like, well, here's the parameters, and you have to stay in these lines. I think a balance is what's really healthy. Um, but for me, I was never a good practicer per se, but I was always playing. So in that way, that's practicing, of course, because nothing replaces fingers on the frets. That's where your tone gets solidified, your time gets solidified, and obviously learning enough along the way to get by, and. But yeah, I was frequently learning things ish. I remember when I first formed the Andy Timmons band in 1988. I didn't have any original material, but so we were doing like Cliffs of Dover and Satch Boogie and Attitude Song, and they would be very ish. I wasn't the kind of guy that's got to sound exactly like Eric Johnson. It's got to. I mean, now if I attempted to play those songs, I'd get murdered online. Like, he's not even close. But that's not how I approached it. I just wanted to, there were great tunes. Let me play the tunes and I'll put my own flavor on it. Yeah.
Right.